All right, so welcome to our deep dive today. We're going to be taking a look at some really interesting material that you all sent in about building a successful career in academia.
Sounds good.
I think this is something that's on a lot of our listeners' minds,
Yeah, definitely a hot topic.
especially, for those of you out there thinking about your own career trajectories.
Absolutely.
So to kind of kick things off, I was looking at this material and I thought,
Yeah.
there are a lot of different takes here on what success actually means in academia.
Right.
So I want to get your perspective on that first.
Well, it's funny because the word success gets thrown around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things that jumped out from the readings you sent
Yeah.
was this idea that it really is subjective and it can look very different for different people.
I like that.
So I think it's important to start there
Absolutely.
because if we're going to talk about building a successful career, we need to kind of figure out what that means for each individual.
Exactly. Yeah. And so how do we get from that sort of, you know, philosophical idea
Sure.
to actually like the concrete steps?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's the key question, right?
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say, oh, define your own success.
Right.
Then it's like, okay, well, how do I actually make that happen?
Right. Yeah. How do I actually get there?
Exactly.
So what did the materials say? What are those key factors?
Well, a few things really popped out.
Right.
One was strategic networking.
Networking. Okay.
And I know that sounds kind of, buzzwordy.
Mm-hmm.
But it was interesting because it wasn't just about like, oh, go to conferences and shake hands.
Right.
One of the papers actually broke it down into these different levels of relationship building.
Okay.
Like building relationships with mentors,
Okay.
building relationships with collaborators,
Right.
and even, potentially thinking about future employers.
Oh, future employers.
Yeah, and this is where it gets interesting because I think there's this traditional view of academia as like, you get on the tenure track,
Right. You're there forever.
you stay at one institution.
Yeah.
But the readings really highlighted how much that's changing.
Oh, interesting.
So thinking about networking as a way to keep those doors open,
Okay.
even if you don't end up going through them,
I like that.
can be really valuable.
So it's kind of future-proofing in a way, right?
Exactly.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's a great takeaway.
Yeah.
Network early and often.
Exactly.
So what else did those articles mention?
Well, this one surprised me a little bit,
Okay.
but there was a huge emphasis on communication skills.
Oh,
Then
interesting.
I don't just mean writing well,
Yeah,
although obviously that's important,
of course. Yeah.
but really being able to present your research clearly
Okay.
and even tailoring it for different audiences.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Like one of the papers talked about, honing your elevator pitch
Okay.
for your work.
So you can talk about it to anybody, right?
Exactly, because if you're thinking about those all-tac career paths,
Yeah.
you need to be able to explain what you do to somebody who's not in the ivory tower.
Right, exactly.
Right.
So how do you actually, get good at that?
Well, there were a few tips.
Okay.
One was practicing with people outside your field,
Oh, interesting.
like, your family, your friends.
So, explaining it to your grandma.
Exactly. If your
Okay.
grandma can understand it,
Well,
you're probably doing a pretty good job.
that's a good test.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also seeking feedback from mentors
Mm-hmm.
or even attending workshops on like science communication.
Oh, that's a good idea.
So these are all things that you can
Yeah.
kind of actively do
Invest in. Yeah.
to get better at communicating your research.
Great. So we've got networking, we've got communication,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about teaching,
Yeah, for sure.
which, for a lot of people in academia is a huge part of their job.
Oh.
So what did the material have to say about that?
It's interesting because the readings actually presented a pretty nuanced perspective on teaching.
Right.
So it's not just about delivering lectures, right? It's about creating these engaging learning experiences.
Okay.
It's about mentoring students.
Yeah.
It's about fostering critical thinking.
Right.
And all of these things contribute to a successful career
Right.
because they're building your reputation and your impact
Right.
beyond just your research output.
And I would imagine it makes the job a lot more fulfilling too, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because if you're, publishing all these papers, but maybe they're not getting a ton of citations,
Yeah.
but you have all these students who are thriving.
Right.
That's got to count for something.
Yeah, I think it really comes back to that idea of aligning your actions with your definition of success.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So if success for you means making a difference in the lives of your students, then that's something to really prioritize.
I like that.
And that actually brings us to the final theme,
Okay.
which is arguably the most important.
Ooh, lay it on me.
Work-life balance.
Ah, yes, the Holy Grail.
Right.
Yes, the ever-elusive.
The ever-elusive work-life balance.
I've heard, horror stories about academics working like 80 hours a week.
Yeah, it's definitely a real concern.
Yeah,
So did the readings have any, like, practical tips for avoiding burnout?
I'm very curious about this.
Yeah, there were actually several that came up repeatedly.
Okay.
Setting boundaries was a big one.
Boundaries. Okay.
Prioritizing tasks.
Oh, okay.
Saying no.
Ooh, saying no, that's a hard one.
Yeah, but it's a superpower.
It really is, yeah.
One of the articles even suggested actually scheduling time
Okay.
for non-academic activities.
Like what?
Like, hobbies, exercise,
Oh, yeah.
things that you enjoy
Okay.
that help you recharge and prevent burnout.
That's good advice for everybody.
Right.
Yeah, not just academics. So I'm hearing a lot of really valuable stuff here.
Mm-hmm.
Networking, communication, teaching, work-life balance.
Yeah,
It feels like all these pieces kind of fit together, right?
they do.
Like a big puzzle.
I think so.
So any final thoughts on how people can kind of navigate this whole complex world?
I think, based on all the material you sent, the big takeaway for me is that you really need to define success on your own terms.
Got it.
So what fulfills you? What impact do you want to make?
Mm-hmm.
And then actively seek out opportunities and mentors that align with that vision.
I love that.
Right.
Yeah, that's great.
And, as you're thinking about those opportunities,
Yeah.
don't forget that you can find top higher ed jobs from around the world
Oh, that's right.
at www.academicjobs.com.
www.academicjobs.com.
So that's a great resource to keep in mind.
Excellent, excellent.
Yeah,
So I think the road might be winding,
for sure.
but if you stay true to yourself
Mm-hmm.
and kind of proactively seek out the resources that you need,
Yeah.
you can absolutely build a successful and fulfilling career.
Absolutely.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your expertise.
Of course.
This has been such a fascinating conversation.
My pleasure.
And to all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this gives you some food for thought
Yeah.
as you continue on your academic journey, wherever it may lead.
Best of luck out there.
All right. Thanks, everyone.